folks. I believe we're going to get the rest of the afternoon started. We're going to get this party started. Just kidding. Charlotte Nolan is going to come on up here and provide opening remarks for this afternoon. Actually, you know what? Before we get into opening remarks from Charlotte, a couple of messages here. If anyone needs any ASL, could you please raise your hand or come on up? And this is our interpreter for the afternoon. And if ASL is needed or wanted, then we're happy to have that. Otherwise, as this morning, we will not. So, and if that changes, if anything changes, what was your name again? Kevin and Brittany are over there, so you can approach either one or let someone know to approach either one of them, and we will have ASL available. Thank you. Just another reminder that if you do not want to be filmed this afternoon, to please let the registration table know. So that's the table just outside of those doors. Otherwise, everything is going to be filmed this afternoon, so you can let registration know, or you can let myself or someone else that you're familiar with in the room know. We'll make sure that the message gets to where it needs to. And the last thing is there's an exhibit happening outside those doors down the hall to the left, I believe. It's called Shards. It is contemporary artists in conversation with the ceramics of our forebears. And the artists are Casey Adams, Jamie Black, Lita Fontaine, and Nikki Little. It's curated by Jenny Western. So if you have a chance, do check out the exhibit that's happening down the hall. It's very, very wonderful. And it's nice that we have it so close to where we are having this anyway. So check it out. And Charlotte Nolan will be delivering opening remarks.
Thank you. Dante, bonjour. Anine, tawao. Bon après-midi. Bienvenue. Hainista, Nipawis, Kapskauki, who is Koya, Equa, Mikusu, Mr. Tim and Pimpatat. My name is Charlotte, and I had a discussion with a young person a little while back about that. She said to me, my slave name is, such and such. And she says, is that your slave name? And I says, no. I says, the name Charlotte was given to me by the old ones. I walk with pride with that name. The other two names I walk with are Stand Strong Eagle Woman and Red Horse Running. Two names that I've walked with, well, the Red Horse Running I've walked with for the last almost 30 years. To speak about being two-spirited, being trans, in the nucleus of a family, I mentioned to some friends of mine during lunch that this is a little bit difficult for me. I'm the youngest of 8 children, and one of 4 left. The rest of them have all left. I've got 7 children of my own, 8 grandchildren, and numerous great-grandchildren. And when I look at acceptance and love and respect, that only my 2 youngest have given me that. The other ones, they've stopped speaking to me ever since I announced in 2015 that I was going to go through with the transitioning and be who I am, me. Last year, I had gone to Gimli to see one of my older sisters. She was in the hospital and she had just a bit of time left. And the last thing she said to me before I left that day was, I love you, baby sister. And if the rest of the family can't accept you, tell them to go fuck themselves. And yeah. I went to her funeral a week later, and her twin sister was there, and her twin sister wouldn't even acknowledge me. So I walked up to her and I said, you know, all my life I've stood by you, and I've supported you in whatever decisions you were doing with your lives, whether you were being divorced or living in violence or whatever. I stood by you. I says, I raised my kids and I stood by them. And I says, now I'm taking time for me to be me. And I says, I'm going to love you till the day I die, because you are my sister, and my brother. And I says, I don't need your acceptance. All I need is, that I'm allowed to do what I want to do, that I don't have to live your life. One day, I hope and pray, that they'll change their minds before they leave. But I know in my heart that I'm going to love them till, they leave or I leave. And my message to all the young people, to all the families, think with your hearts, not your minds. When I look at this thing that Creator gave us, this mind, this intelligence, so that we can speak, we can create things, we can eat with our hands, we can walk upright. And yet we still struggle with allowing somebody to be different than us. If we think with our hearts, none of that will exist. Because in our hearts, there's no color, there's no gender, there's no race. In our hearts, we're all human beings. I shared this last night with a group that was here, Take Back the Night, because that's another area that we struggle with, the violence that's out there. So I'm going to urge each and every one of you, for everything that you take from this conference this weekend, take this part back to your homes, to your families, to your communities, wherever you come from. Encourage all your relatives to think with their hearts, to speak with their hearts, to see with their hearts, and to feel with their hearts. And racism and bigotry and everything else will disappear, because we'll all be the same. In 2015, when I decided that I was going to be me, and I did my makeup and got dressed, and I had to go to the store, buy a pack of cigarettes. I was walking down Alfred Street to Isabel, or Salter, and there was a group of children playing on the sidewalk. And a little boy looked up at me and he said, "Are you a man or a woman?" I says, "Honey, I still may look like a man on the outside, but I'm all woman inside." He said, "Okay," and kept on playing. Now, if the mind of a child can be that open, that they can accept people for whoever they are, no matter what, then we as adults need to learn from our children that we're all the same. Last night I was telling people when they were going out on that march, hold hands with the person next to you. Know that you're related. Don't think of color. Don't think of race, gender, or anything. Know that you're related as a human being and walk with them with pride. So that's my message to all of you. When you go home, take the message that you've learned here and share it with your relatives. And I want to welcome the two families that are coming up here that are going to share their stories about families. And I hope and I pray that this conference will grow to an even larger one one that people from all over will come and say, we want change. We want safer places. We want love and acceptance. That's what Creator made us, you know. Creator doesn't look at us as different colors or different languages or different genders. Creator looks at us as human beings. We all bleed the same. I slashed my wrist. I'm going to bleed the same color as you. I grew up with racism. I grew up with bigotry. I wasn't white enough. I wasn't red enough. I wasn't straight enough. I wasn't smart enough. And it's funny. They told me I wasn't smart enough, that I'd never amount to anything but, you know, a drunken native on the street. But when I went to see a psychiatrist in 1965, I was 15. The results of that psychiatrist from the 2 days I was spent in his office was that my intelligence was way above. I knew things that university students didn't know, but yet I was dumb. Today I look at all the things I've accomplished across this country. And when we were speaking about the universities bringing space for all of us, I worked at the University of BC, and they have the First Nations House of Learning there. And I was the foreman on the library, the round concrete library with the roof in the shape of a teepee. There's a sweat lodge beside there. We need that here. We need that so that everybody can come and learn from one another. So enjoy this conference. Enjoy the words of our relatives that are going to come up and speak. And know that we are all the same. That's my message to you. Eko say hi, hi.
Thank you, Charlotte. So we've got two families that will be sharing some of their family stories with us. And this is we felt this was important. It's important for Two-Spirit and QT BIPOC families to share their stories of what it means to have queer family members, what it means to come out in your family, what it means to grow and face challenges in our communities as Two-Spirit and QT BIPOC folks. So I'm super happy to introduce the first family. I've known Reno Johnston of the Johnston family for a few years, and following the Johnston family will be the Sinclair family. So I advise the Sinclair family to start taking notes on the questions so you can get ready. They're not going to be different questions. So I've known Reno of the Johnston family for a few years. He's a lovely human being. He really is. And I'm really excited that his family is here, most of his family, to share a lot of their stories. So Allison James, Reno, Joelle, Cass, and Silken make up the creative, candid, dynamic, outspoken, authentic, and wildly entertaining Johnstons. Who wrote this? You wrote this? Awesome. Allison and James are both graduates with background in social work. In their earlier years, Allison was a model and singer, and James played basketball. Joelle and Cass, the second oldest boys, are singers, songwriters, performers, music producers, and they are both fathers. Silken, the youngest sister who could not be here today, works in the healthcare industry and is the mother of a beautiful daughter. Reno Winston Johnston, the oldest of the four, is a life and business coach, personal and professional development facilitator, speaker, writer, media personality, and creative strategist who runs his own personal business, appropriately named It Just Got Reno. His creative, charismatic, and free-spirited quality has landed him opportunities ranging from wardrobe styling. I have definitely gone to him for wardrobe advice. I advise you to do the same. He's here. I heard that it's free today, like 15-minute consults, just today. Television, film appearances, fashion, public relations, to facilitating transformational conversations and workshops, and launching a collaborative living and working space and living in Bali for 6 months. Reno is passionate and wholeheartedly outspoken when it comes to making this world a better place to live in and empowering people to live their own unique and authentic power. And his mission is to support us all in discovering and embodying the best versions of ourselves, aligning with our purpose and getting paid to do meaningful work. I'd like to introduce to you the Johnston family. You guys could come take a seat. All right, so maybe we'll start with an icebreaker. Yeah. I love an icebreaker. Okay. So just so everyone knows, do you want to go down the line and introduce yourselves personally to everybody? I've already gone through your names, but
Okay. I'm Allison Johnston. I'm the mother.
I'm Reno Johnston, and I'm the son and the man.
I'm Cass Johnston, and I'm the youngest of the boys.
And I'm James Malott. I'm the dad. I'm not a Johnston, but I am the father.
I'm the baldest.
okay. Reno wanted everyone to know, it was very important, he mentioned this earlier, I almost forgot, that just the other day he deadlifted 140 pounds.
I did today.
So that was the thing. He wanted us to show the video. We couldn't make it work. He didn't send it in advance. Okay, so maybe we'll just get right into some of your story, Reno, with your family.
Cool.
Yeah? So what was it, can I ask just open it up from there? What was it like for you coming out as a queer person, as a gay man, to your family?
It was edgy, definitely nerve-wracking, and comedic at the same time. I'm lucky because my story wasn't, I would say it wasn't as dark as, some of the other stories you hear. So I feel really blessed in that regard. I remember feeling really, really anxious about coming out, but there's a bit of a backstory leading up to it, because if you knew me when I was a kid, it was blatantly obvious that I was a homosexual. My mom can speak to that. Yeah, for sure.
I need to say this. Reno had an alter ego. Her name was Rena. And she wore high heels and a dreadlock wig and a blue dress and red lipstick. And she was probably about 4. And so she would tromp down the street saying, "My name is Rena." And a lot of people were like, "Why are you letting him do that?" Well, because that's who he is. He's having fun. On a personal note, I knew Reno was gay or special in some way, and that he would definitely have something to give to the designer world or the clothing world or the fashion world or something. When he was 2, he came into my room and told me, "Mom, wear this." And he reached into my closet and he grabbed a shirt, a skirt, a pair of shoes, a purse, and threw it on my bed. And I sat there going, "Oh my God, I would wear that." So I knew. So when Reno decided on the computer, I was sitting on the computer one night and he was sending me messages and said, "Mom, I have something to tell you." And I started to chuckle inside and went, "Here we go." It's coming. And he said, I'm really nervous about telling you. And I said, "And I already know." And he's like, "What do you mean you already know? You don't even know what I'm going to ask you." And I'm like, "Okay, you're right. I don't know. What are you going to tell me, Rena? What is this big news?" And I was chuckling, sitting at this computer chuckling. And he said, "I'm gay." And I said, "I've known since you were 2. And he's just like, "How did you know that?" And I said, "I just knew. And I've always been okay with it. Whether it was true or not, I was never going to tell him. I was going to allow him to figure all that out on his own. But I just always knew that there was something a little bit interesting about this boy, and especially the fashion stuff. I mean, he could put together an outfit for me anytime. I'd be like, "Reno, what should I wear? I got to go here." And he'd tell me. So, that was always a bonus.
Well, And I'll also add to that because I mean there were definitely some obvious signs. Now, I'm not going to use cuss words, but what I would like to know is we're all adults here, so I can bring up.
There's one baby in the room.
Okay, cool. So earmuffs.
We have to ask that, the Sinclair family.
No, it's all good though. So when I was a bit younger during teen years, which we're all familiar with here, you know, you go through a period where you're starting to understand yourself as a sexual being, right? And we start to explore different things. And I can remember this period where we got satellite TV. It was a big deal because we lived in the Interlake, right? This was huge. Television, yay. So I decided to order some adult entertainment. Discreetly, apparently not. Mom got the bill. And she's like, so the titles weren't visible, right? But you knew what was ordered because they were more expensive than most movies, obviously. So I remember I was in the city at my grandma's, and my mom calls me, and she says to me, so is there something you want to talk to me about? And I'm like, oh no, like what, you know, what's going on here? And she's like, well, I got the satellite bill. And there's these movies, right? This big bill, about $60, $80, right? What's that about? And I was like, I don't know. I ordered movies. She's like, are you sure there's not something you want to tell me? I started bawling. I broke down and started crying. She's like, why are you crying? I said, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. She's like, okay, well, we don't need to talk about it now, but you're still going to pay this bill. So I was like, okay, I'll pay the bill. I'll pay the bill. So, I mean, at that point, I knew she knew, and I feel like I always sort of knew that everyone had an idea, but what I really appreciated is that most people were just really respectful of the fact that it wasn't something that I wanted to talk about. So I felt really lucky in that regard. That wasn't always the case, you know, in high school or in the neighborhood. Like, I definitely dealt with, you know, being picked on and called names and bullied. I was sort of the runt of the litter, so to speak, you know, this gangly, like, skinny kid with a big bottom lip and the big nose and the ears. Not anymore, right? Look at me now. But yeah, at the time I was an easy target, right? And I'm black and I'm gay, right? Which is like, I mean, may as well be a bullseye at that time. So, I mean, it was tough at times. It was definitely challenging.
So I'm curious then to hear from your brother and from your father. What was your experience in Reno as a young one and Reno coming out?
For me, I knew Reno was gay before he told me. But it didn't, we had another MSN conversation, this whole now that we're talking about MSN, that's how we all communicated before text messages and all that. That's okay. I had moved back to Toronto. Alice and I had separated, and I went back to Toronto. I'm from Toronto originally, and I went back to Toronto, and Reno and I were messaging each other, and I was asking him how he's doing, etc. And I said something to the effect, I said, so you're hanging out at Club Desire. And it used, when I was here, Club Desire was called the Bank. And that's where, well, I used to hang out at the Bank. I used to go to, and it was a pretty live club. I mean, it was happening, good music, and, you know, we had a good time there. It changed, right? And Reno was hanging at Desire. And I said, so you're hanging at Desire? And he said, yeah, I'm kind of living the alternative lifestyle. I was like, whatever floats your boat. I said, you know, I still love you. It doesn't matter to me. And all of a sudden, I get these letters, whew, one of those PHEWs, phew. You know, I'm like, what's the big deal? He said, you were the hardest person that I was worried about telling, because I'm your atypical 6'4" guy, basketball player, jock. I mean, sports was, I used to run down in the basement to get away from my kids so that I could go watch sports. That's how much I love sports. And I was the sports guy in the family, and Reno was not the sports guy. Reno was the furthest thing from sports. But, you know, I said it didn't matter to me, and, you know, I'm gonna love him regardless of what he does, who he's with, and that's basically it in a nutshell, you know. And I still love him today. There's some days I love to choke him, but that's because I've learned that, we just talked about it before we came up here, is he's got this brand of his. I'm not sure if you guys, any of you who know Reno, he has a brand. It just got Reno. You will hear this again because he thinks he's, well, no, I'm not going to say it like that. He knows he's going to be popular. I don't know if he's going to reach Kardashian status or not, but it just got Reno as a brand, and I'm proud of his brand, and I love him.
Yeah. To elaborate on that more is I always knew Reno was gay too growing up, and all my friends and stuff, they would come over and they would interact with us, and they'd be like, bro, is your brother gay? Like, what's up? And I'd be like, go ask him. Like, if you really want to know, then why don't you ask him? And when he came up to me, I think it was his 18th birthday, and he was like intoxicated, and he comes and wraps his arm around me, and he's like, brother, I got to tell you something. I'm gay. And I was like, I already knew that. like what? He's like, how did you know? I'm like, how could you not know? Like, it makes no sense if you did not know Reno is gay. And people would actually, because Reno would deny it to the death, they'd be like, no, he's just like that. He's into fashion. I'm like, no, totally not.
You know, I had every, like, it's really interesting that I ended up in public relations because I went to school for PR. And it makes sense now because I was such a good spinner, right? Anytime someone would try to out me, I could spin it some way, you know? There was always some way that I could sort of weasel out of the conversation. Luckily, I don't have to do that anymore. It's really nice. Now I can just own it. But yeah, it was always really nerve-wracking when someone would ask me, or, you know, there was a fear of being outed before I was ready to, you know, to share that I was gay. But again, I always knew that everyone else knew. And telling my dad, as I said, and even my brothers, I think was the most challenging aspect of it because as we know in society, there are these ideals put forth around what it means to be a man and a boy in this world, and I never really lived up to that stereotype, that ideal. And what's beautiful is that I can now own the fact that I am a man and the man that I want to be. And I also, I'm hearing a lot about, you know, this being two-spirited. And I had a conversation last night with a woman, and someone who identifies as two-spirited. And I had asked, you know, how do you define that? And it was really interesting to hear because in that moment, I think it became more clear to me than ever that I would say that I identify with that label as well, or that
The description, maybe?
description, we'll say. Yeah, in that I take pride in identifying with my, you know, divine masculine and feminine, you know, spirit. And I embrace the, you know, the feminine aspects of myself as well as the masculine, right? I'm here in, you know, clothes that would be deemed male clothes. I've got some bronzer on my cheeks right now, you know what I mean? So it's and you know, flowers on my lapel. So I mean, this for me, like, I'm not ashamed of it, you know. I've come to embrace these parts of myself.
So you kind of touched on the reality of trying to live up to what maybe broader society would define masculine and masculinity and boyhood and manhood as. What would you say was the impact of being black in your experience of coming out. And that's for your family as well. What in the experience of being black people and having your black child come out to you within the context of blackness and black community and black family?
Yeah.
I think what's interesting that you should ask that question is because that's come up a lot in my life lately. I've spent some time in the Caribbean. And so, and my father was from Trinidad. And we didn't talk about Reno being gay, not with my dad. My dad loved Reno from the moment he was born. He was the first, and he knew. But we just weren't allowed to say it. It was a conversation that we didn't have. We just said Reno is Reno. There's no labels. We're not having that discussion. He was not accepting that. And so what he did accept is that Reno was who he was. But culturally, in the Caribbean, it's not something that's accepted. Actually, Rena was looking up some information the other day because we were talking about going to St. Vincent, and there's laws still in the Caribbean that we cannot show physical affection to same-sex partners in the Caribbean. And so that's really interesting, and it speaks a lot to what it would be like to be a black person coming out when your own culture doesn't accept you. So I found that kind of interesting. I wasn't aware of the laws, but I have had multiple conversations now with my friends in the Caribbean, especially the men. And they have such a difficult time with this. Like one of them said, well, I'm going to have to keep Reno close to me to make sure that he's safe. And I thought, wow, that's kind of crappy, that our own people or, our own culture will not accept us. So what's interesting about that is we were the only black family the only black family in our community. And so for Reno to be coming out, I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, so we, when I was about 12, we moved to Gimli, Manitoba. So if you've ever been there, you can understand how that might be a little challenging. We were, I think, the only black family for the majority of the time there. I think there was one period where a black family had sort of come into the town and then eventually moved. I was the only black kid in my high school. So again, the only black kid in my high school and a closeted gay man. Definitely wasn't an easy thing. It's interesting because in a way, I suppose, again, I use this word luck a lot. I lucked out in that I became a sort of, I don't want to say mascot, but I was the token black guy. That's what it was, right? So I'm new to the school, and it's my first year in high school, and I'm getting invited to, like, senior parties, right? Because everyone's like, who's the new black guy? Like, we want to hang out with them. So in that sense, I dodged a bullet, right? But it was, let me tell you, it was ridiculous. The first day of school when we initially moved there, the questions I was asked, right? And do you have a gun? Are you in a gang, right? Like, these are the questions, and I kid you not, these were legitimate questions, right, that I was asked, right? This actually happened. And I was sitting there thinking, like, no, not at all, not at all. So, yeah, it definitely made things interesting. And there were certainly comments. There's a story about a boy who, on the playground, my first or second week of school, had come up to me and thought it was funny to call me the N-word. And so at that point, I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to be dealing with here. So I walked away, I went inside, and I stood outside of his classroom. And when he came in from the break, I don't condone violence, but I grabbed him and I slammed him up against the locker. And I said, if you ever call me that again, I'm going to hurt you. And someone had to split us up, and that was that. But, in that moment, I just thought, like, I need to make it clear that this is not going to go on while I'm here. This is not something that I'm okay with, So that's just one of a number of experiences I had as a queer person of color in Gimli. They weren't all horrible. There were some really amazing, amazing, supportive people who really, I think, saw me and understood me as a person and really saw, you know, my light and my beauty. And others who I think, you know, their heads were just so far up their butts that they couldn't, you know, so.
So was it as family members then seeing this happen, right? So you all say you knew that Reno was gay from a very young age, and you know you're growing up in a community that's white. How did you feel? Like, what were your thoughts and feelings surrounding knowing that you've got a black brother, a black son in a white community who's most likely gay?
I don't know. I didn't really think about it. Like growing up, when we moved to Gimli, people were always talking about like to be black, you had to talk, walk, and dress a certain way. You know, I kind of took into that when I started to listen to a lot of hip hop music and stuff. You know, I was sagging my pants and things like that. At first he kind of got into it, but he was mostly well dressed. You know, he kept himself together real nice and stuff.
Saggy pants can be well dressed too. Saggy pants can be well dressed too.
But I'm saying, like, for him, like, he was always on his fashion tip, and for me, it was like, I want my clothes to be extra large, you know, kind of like that, wear big chains and stuff. But I didn't think about it as you had to be like a certain way. People would ask me like, your brother's black and he's supposed to be like a gangster or something like that. I'm like, you know, and it's like, what's it like having a gay brother? And it's like, there's gay people in the world, you know what I'm saying? It was just like, my mom was always really accepting of people, and she taught us to be really accepting and not see colors and like ways of life. It was like the caliber of person that you are. So it was like, that's kind of what we grew up thinking about, you know?
I didn't live in Gimli, but I used to come. I would come and get the kids every second weekend, or we would meet halfway in Clandeboye. Actually, they went to Winnipeg Beach first. It was Winnipeg Beach, which is even a smaller, whiter community. Then they went to Gimli. Then they moved out to Riverton. And then soon after, when they moved out to Riverton, that's when I decided I was moving back to Toronto. I said, pretty soon I'm going to be driving to Thompson to see my kids. And I couldn't take it. Anyways, I moved back to Toronto. But when I used to come to Gimli and Riverton, our family was known. You know, like everybody knew this crew. But I never heard anybody drop the N-bomb. Might have been because I'm 6'4" and 240 pounds. Might have had something to do with it. I don't know. But I never faced, and I've never heard of them facing racism. Cass, my son, he's got the worst of it. And more recently, I could speak to this, but I'll let him speak to it. But when he told me, it upset me big time that he has a son who's part Aboriginal, and they live in a northern community on the reserve. I used to say, "What is this working?" Like I used to say to him, I said, "I don't need a microphone really. I can speak loud." You do. I do. Yeah. Why is it? Hello. There we go. He told me he was living on the reserve, and there were some issues happening there, and he has a son, a little 6-year-old. He's not little. He's a big boy. But he was telling me, it's tough out there, Dad. He said, you don't know what we're going through. Like there was water they had no running water where he was staying, and his son was being called the N-word, and he was being called. And I'm on the phone, on the other end of the phone, sitting in Toronto, and I'm enraged. I'm saying, like, why is my son and my grandson being called this in a small community? And I grew up in the 60s, and there was tons of racism. And Reno and I spoke about, I'll get to that other piece about coming out, because we have a nice little story to tell on National Coming Out Day. But what Cass was going through and Amari was going through on a reserve, it just blew me away that, and I shared with the family just before we came up here about, you know, I grew up in Toronto and I played lacrosse, and I remember playing against a team called Six Nations from Brantford, Ontario. And they were all natives. They were all Aboriginal and Indigenous. What is the proper, is it Indigenous people?
I believe it's
Aboriginal people? Which is most accepted?
Indigenous, but we have a lot of Indigenous people in the room that you could direct that question to,
Somebody help me out.
right? Indigenous, yeah.
Indigenous? Thank you. Okay. Six Nations was an Indigenous team, all Indigenous people. And I played for a team called St. Christopher House, and most of us were black, and we were playing lacrosse. And as you know, lacrosse is Canada's national sport. Not too many people know that, but it's Canada's national sport. Everybody thinks it's hockey. I think they switched it up recently where hockey is the winter sport, lacrosse is the summer sport. But we played lacrosse against Six Nations, and these guys were calling us the N-bomb at every opportunity that they could. We were going into scrums in the corner. We were getting elbowed. We would get slashed or butt end with the lacrosse stick. And I went back to my coach, and I was 11, 12 years old at the time. I'm saying, Bob, I said, why are these guys, why are they calling us nigger? You know, I said, excuse me for saying it, but I just had to get it out. Anyways, he would say, I said, aren't we all alike? They came from a struggle. We came from a struggle. Like, we're all the same. And I was 12 years old then, and it's still going on today. That's what breaks my heart today. But when my son tells me that he's got to hear that today, coming from an Aboriginal community or an Indigenous community, it hurts. It hurts. But for this guy, we had a conversation about National Coming Out Day. And I don't know if anybody has Reno on Facebook, but he thought it was entertaining to tell the world that he was coming out on that day, even though this years ago he had came out. And we talked briefly about what it was like for me. What was it like for me to deal with gay people or people coming out and being black? And I said to Reno, I said, he's got it a lot easier today than black people that were gay or any gay people back in the 60s and 70s. Like Allison alluded to it, like in the Caribbean community, people are not accepting of it and they have laws. But back in the 70s and 60s, like people would get beat up. They'd get beat up bad for being gay or lesbian or queer, whatever. It was, I remember they had bathhouses in Toronto that used to get raided by the police because men would go to these bathhouses to meet other men and engage in whatever activities they were doing. But they raided this place and they shamed these men and beat them and dragged them out. There's pictures about it in the archives in the Toronto Star, and I think there was some kind of reconciliation going on during Pride Week. They talked about.
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple of points that you've made. One, so in talking about the fact that you have Indigenous family members, right? And so, you know, there's the interesting thing, the important thing about, you know, spaces like this and dialogue that is led by Two-Spirit and QT BIPOC folks is the fact that we do see a lot of, you know, diversity in our families, people marrying into other cultures, et cetera. And so it becomes more than just, you know, what is your experience as a black man coming out to a black family? And it becomes more than just, you know, having a black family. So you have Indigenous family members. And so, you know, when we talk about solidarity in communities, right, and the challenges in building solidarity, because we all do come from certain struggles. I mean, the reality of it is black people benefit from the displacement of Indigenous people on their own land, right? This isn't our land. And that's really important to acknowledge whose land that we're on. And so when building those relationships, and those relationships are in your family, how do you all navigate that, right? How do you all navigate the fact that there are different identities in your families, right? It's not just as simple as, you know, Reno coming out to his black parents and having black family members. It's much more dynamic than that. And the other point that I wanted to ask actually as well, in your experience, Reno, yeah, it's not what it was 60, 70 years ago, but, you know, queer people are still being assaulted and brutalized, and bathhouses are still being raided and the police are still acting some type of way in our community. So, you know, what's your experience in that, Reno, as, you know, 2017 queer black man? So there's kind of two parts to that.
It's interesting because, so let me first start. So I'm going to answer that question in a sort of roundabout manner, because I don't want to forget what I was about to say earlier, which is that I was at this, I guess you could call it an after party one evening, and two of my gay friends were on the couch, and you know, they were being affectionate, and there were some other people in the room. There were heterosexual people in the room, some women and some men. Two of the men were black, and I remember after my friends had left the room or the suite to go across the hall, they were expressing how they were really bothered by what they had seen just go on. You know, they don't need to do that in front of us and blah, 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 right? And they had some choice words. And I sat with them and I said to them, you guys, I said, I agree with what you're saying. You know, I understand that maybe this wasn't the appropriate place to be engaging in that kind of, you know, affection, if you will. I said, but in regards to some of the other things that you said, I said, you know, I'm a gay man and a black man, right? And I understand the struggle that, you know, I understand the struggle that, you know, black people and queer people have to go through. I said to them, and here you are, right? You guys, fellow black men who understand the history and what people of color went through because they were different, and you're treating somebody the same way, right? So I can't specifically remember the exact words that were brought up as we were speaking, but the gist of it was what I had just said. And they had said to me at the end of the conversation, you know what? We hadn't thought of it that way. We hadn't thought of it that way. Because I said, you know, you're essentially treating us the same way that, you know, our people had been treated. And you would think that we would know better, you know. So it was a really wonderful conversation because I feel like something clicked. Because I had the courage to sit down with two, you know, big, you know, large, intimidating footballer, you know, black men and have this conversation with them. But I thought it was necessary. And, you know, by the end of that conversation, we had a very different relationship, and they had respect for me, and that was really, really nice. So the reason I brought that up was to sort of speak to what we were discussing earlier. Now, in regards to your question, it's not been nearly as difficult. I mean, I've been called some terrible names. You know, someone threw a McDonald's drink at me one time on the street. There was another instance where I was at a house party and I was reading Cosmopolitan in a room full of girls, and this guy said to me, you know, why are you reading that magazine? Are you gay? And I said, actually, yeah, I am. And I said to him, and if you knew what was in this magazine, you'd probably read it too, right? So, because if you've seen Cosmopolitan, there are a lot of tips in there that men can, you know, could learn a thing or two from, right? So, anyway, luckily my girlfriends, they were all like, they tore into this guy and they stood up for me. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, you know, to have people who are willing to speak up and defend me and, you know, and stand up with me in solidarity against this kind of behavior. But what I wanted to add is it's interesting because when I finally came out, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm in the clear. I'm entering a community of people who know my struggle and people who are like me. I'm going to be okay now, right? It gets better. it did get better. But what I want to bring awareness to is the fact that there is still that sort of like racist rhetoric and behavior going on within spaces where I'm supposed to feel safe. So it's interesting when I started getting it more from people who I identify with than from people who identify as heterosexual, right? Or Caucasian, right? Yeah.
So I guess the last things we've got to move on to the Sinclair family right away. What would you say is I guess maybe a call to action? If you had to put out a call to action to people in like communities, individuals, institutions, youth, what would your call to action for folks be?
You know, I think it's important that communication happen. Like, events like this are amazing. I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to have my family here, and I'm honored that they would, you know, my family's been flown in, which I think is so amazing. And we're sitting up here, and we're telling a story, you know, and sharing our experiences. I think this is so amazing. So I think, you know, having conversations like this, but also not just in spaces like this, because the beauty is that I think, you know, the University of Winnipeg, I went to school here for 4 years, and what I love is that this sort of event and these conversations are not foreign here, right? But there are spaces where they are. You know, local nightclubs or different groups or parties even, right? And I really think that it's important that these kinds of conversations be happening and these kinds of stories be told in some of these unconventional and untraditional spaces, because the problem isn't in this room. Like within reason, right? The problem isn't in this room. It's in some of the spaces where the conversations aren't being had and we're not telling our stories. So I think it's important that we find ways. Every single person in this room right now is a leader, right? We're all here because we're leaders. We are all here because we care. And so what I would encourage you to do is connect with some aspect of what we're discussing here today that really aligns with you in your heart, that really, you know, causes some pain and some passion, and find a way as an individual and a leader to create a conversation around that. Yeah, please.
I just want to add, when I was a bit younger, I was having some, I call it sexual identity crisis, and I had a conversation with my mother. And my mother was very much the one who began this sort of, in our family, this sort of open, allowing people to be who they are. And my mother was a white woman. And she told me a story about a woman that she had a crush on when she was young, and that it wasn't allowed. And so that was squashed, wouldn't happen, she wasn't allowed. And then it happened to me. And I was able to have a conversation with my mother, who then told me her story. And I was able to take my story and share my story and share it with my son. And so what I find really important is within families, that these discussions happen, that we allow ourselves as parents to allow our children to be who they are. One of the things that I've always told every single one of my children is be what you love and be who you are, and never be afraid to be that. And so that conversation began with my mother. And so what I would like to say is, you know, not just within venues and public venues, but in your family, with the people that you love, with my 6 grandchildren and one on the way, regardless of what color, because I'm telling you, they go from pasty white and platinum blonde to, you know, they're every color and they're every nation. And so hopefully that's something that I've been able to give to my children and that other people can give to their children. Because whether you're gay or black or brown or whatever color you are, we have struggles within our families of accepting each other. And so, like, I have to note that the way these guys have learned to manage their differences is hilarious. If you've ever walked into a room, it's like, hey, G-Unit, You know, that's how Reno refers to his gangster brother. And his gangster brother will say, Reno, you dropped something, you know, and he'll bend over. You dropped your gay. It's on the floor. You know, like they just have this way of accepting each other with humor. James has called these kids some of the most racist names I've ever heard in my life, but it's become a joke within our family. And so it's how, it's horrible, but it's how the family has dealt with I can't even explain it. They've used the things that they are thrown at them by the world, and they've used it to laugh at each other and laugh at themselves, and humor. No, don't try this at home. But
I can't try that in my home. That's not my house. Nope.
But you know what? Every gathering, every family gathering is it's fun. There's a lot of laughter. It's again allowed these kids to be whoever they are, whether they're gay or not gay. I really didn't care whether they were male, female, whatever. You know, when Reno wanted a wig, I bought him one. And when he wanted a fur coat and to dress up like Tina Turner, we did that too.
I'm just going to say one last thing, too, just to add to that. I think it's important, again, back to communications and conversations and having them in these non-traditional environments. Sometimes it is a bit edgy and uncomfortable. You know, you may be in a space where you think people might not be accepting of your views or what you have to say. I think it's important that we lean into vulnerability and that we embrace, you know, being courageous in these settings, because you never know who's listening and who would benefit from hearing what you have to say. I've changed a lot of minds just by being who I am and being brave enough to be who I am in environments where I might not be accepted. There are a lot of people who now respect me and appreciate me for that reason. So if anything, spend time in spaces where, you know, and have conversations and be you in spaces where it may not be, you know, as normal, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much to your entire family for being here and for sharing your family story and your personal stories. I've got a little gift for each of you, and we're going to get the Sinclair family up here right away. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think the thing that is really great about this conference and the great thing about spaces like this is that there are a lot of experiences within our communities, within Two-Spirit and QT BIPOC communities, that are similar experiences. There are shared experiences. And there are also conversations and dialogue that you know, we could be and should be having between our communities. And so I hope that over this weekend, you know, folks are reaching out to one another, we're asking each other questions, we're communicating, and we're talking through some of a lot of it's going to be light and fun and comfortable, and a lot of it's not going to be fun and comfortable at all. And hopefully we can grow through some of that with each other. And, you know, the beauty of hearing about our family stories is recognizing, you know, for a long time growing up, I tried to pretend that my family had all of our stuff, you know, neatly lined up and everything made sense, and that's just ridiculous, you know. And the more I talk to people about my family, the more I realize that, you know, everybody's families has dynamics and are dynamic, and there are layers, and there are things that are beautiful, and there are things that are messy, and it takes a lot for a family to come up and sit on stage and share about their family and their experiences, so we're grateful for that. And we now have the pleasure of having the Sinclair family join us on stage. We've got Catherine Morisseau Sinclair, Gajik Morisseau Sinclair, and Misko Beaudry. We've also got Senator Murray Sinclair, who will be not here, but there'll be a video. And so I'd like to ask the family to come up on stage, if they wouldn't mind. And then we will have the video from Senator Murray Sinclair played. So we have, yeah, round of applause. Beautiful family. Oh, Danae's coming up. Amazing. Hi, Danae. Okay, so we have, yeah, Danae, wonderful. And the baby, yeah? Let's have the baby up here, why not? What's the baby's name? Shabanaquit is going to join us too. That's wonderful. Okay, so time spent with the Sinclair family has been described as intense and full of energy. As Anishinaabe people, they are connected by the work they do together as part of Three Fires Medea-Wewin Lodge. Mom, Catherine, comes from Crane River, Manitoba, and Dad, Murray, calls Selkirk, Peguis First Nation, his home. So today, the children have families of their own and live across the continent, but take full advantage of being together whenever possible by filling the dinner table with laughter and teasing and adorable babies. Oh my gosh. While individually, each are well recognized for their personal passions, this family thrives best on being together as they support each other to succeed and excel. And all very fashionable, I have to say. Very fashionable. Reno, I think they're kind of putting you to, I don't know, it's a fashion competition. Okay. All right, so I think we've now got a video. Wonderful.
Hello, everybody. I want to apologize for not being able to attend this evening and to thank you for the invitation to be part of the evening's activities. I particularly want to thank my family who are participating this evening with you for agreeing to be part of the discussion and the dialogue that's going on around the LGBT community and the role of family, and to indicate that I've always been supportive of the public dialogue being held more often, because I think that it's only through discussion and dialogue and education that we're able to address the homophobia that exists out there. It's important also for the public to know that we're talking about real families. We're talking about people who live, breathe, live beside them, work beside them, who have the same concerns that they have. And for us to have an opportunity to share some of those concerns, particularly around treatment of our children, the discussion around our children is very important. I also want to acknowledge that I can't be there with you. I apologize for that. I'm tied up in other activities that have prevented me from being able to travel back to Winnipeg in a timely manner. And I hope that through this presentation, I'm going to be able to contribute to the dialogue. I know that the members of my family who are there, Catherine, Gajik, and Misko, are going to be able to share with you their experience, and perhaps even their experience with me. So maybe it is lucky that I'm not there. But I know that they have a lot that they can contribute to the conversation this evening. They're people who've given this a lot of thought, and I know that the thinking that they put into it will be helpful to your dialogue as well. The role of the family with the LGBT community became very important to me and to all of us shortly after the Orlando shooting last year. During that time, while that was going on, those of us who had children in the LGBT community were very concerned about how the public discussion around the victims of that shooting was going, and the failure to recognize that these were people who had families, and the impact that that shooting was having upon the families was completely forgotten in the public dialogue. I did a presentation in the Senate chamber on the day after the shooting and mentioned specifically that when that event occurred, my thoughts went immediately to the fact that there were family members who were suffering out there, and in particular parents of those children, those adults who had been killed in that shooting, and that our concerns were not being publicly acknowledged at that time. But it's more than just seeing ourselves as victims that I wanted people to understand, and that's why this event is so important. When we had our conversation in our family with Kindzierski in particular about her recognition that she was gay and that she wanted us to know that and she wanted us to acknowledge that, and she told us how much she was struggling with that announcement or that indication to us. Our first indication as parents were to make sure that she understood how much we loved her, how much we wanted her to know that she was a member of our family, and that no matter what happened, no matter how things occurred throughout her life, no matter what the public said, no matter what other members of our family said, that she always had our love and our support. We also strove to make sure that members of our family were aware of that fact, and also that they were made to recognize that their own language needed to be sensitive to the fact that they were using words and language that was not appropriate in many instances, and we would sometimes have to call people within our own family on it. Because we not only wanted our daughter to be comfortable with other members of our family, but we also wanted them to be comfortable with her as well. And I have to say that the education process that put our family members through was exceptional. They were quite willing to embrace her and continue to embrace her, and not once did we ever hear a negative comment about her. Her love for us and our love for her has continued, and her love for her family members has continued and has grown throughout the years as well. When we met Misco through ceremonies that we attended on a regular basis, we encountered a young woman who was struggling with her identity as an Anishinaabe. She was trying to find her way in life too, and we heard her story. We knew her story as a young woman who had grown up without really having the opportunity to have a sense of family as well. And we embraced her equally. We wanted her to be a member of our family. She has blessed us with her partner Erica and providing us with a grandchild, and raising that grandchild along with her partner Erica in a beautiful, strong environment to be a proud young man, proud of his identity as well. And we know that there will be challenges for them as they grow up as parents of a young boy. But those challenges, we hope, will be no different than the same kind of challenges that other families have as well. The one thing that I would say about what this experience has taught me as a father of gay children is that we need to ensure that we have a clear understanding of the fact that our role is no different, being fathers of those children, being fathers of all children that come into our families. We still have a responsibility to provide for them. We still have a responsibility to help them to come to terms with the problems and the hurdles that they face in life. We have a responsibility to help them through life. We have a responsibility to love them and to raise them to be the best human beings that they could possibly be. I have no doubt that you have before you this evening in Kindzierski and Misco two wonderful, strong Anishinaabe Kwe who will be able to show you what it means to be a young woman, an adult in this community, in this world today, and that they will continue to contribute in a positive way to our community as Indigenous people, but also to our family, because they are wonderful examples to their nieces, their nephews. They are role models to all of the little children when it comes to showing what it means to be successful. I want them to know how much I love them. I want them to know that my love for them will continue forever. And there will not be a day that I do not worry about them, because they are women, they are Indigenous, and there is a world out there that doesn't always respect who they are. But at the same time, I know that I will always be there for them. Thank you.
That was a lovely. Have you seen that before? Had any of you seen that before? Oh, you'd seen that. Okay. That was beautiful. I think it was. I'm not sure what you think. We'll get into that in a second. It's not bad. Okay. So, you've heard from Senator Murray Sinclair. You get to hear from the rest of the family now. Maybe to the queer family members, can you share a little bit about yourselves and your experience in your family as?
Hello. Bonjour. Gejik Nabagokwe Indishnakas Kiko Dodem. My name is Gejik Morso Sinclair, and I am the youngest family member of the Sinclair families. Let's see. It's a fairly similar sort of story. I think as soon as I was born, I knew I was gay. I was in the nursery saying, "Hey, how you doing over there?" And there's like so many photos of me running around in diapers and plaid that I'm not sure why Mom was like particularly a little bit shocked when we had a conversation. But I came out when I was about 15, 16, but I knew like earlier than that I really, really, really liked women, and that's who I connected with the most, and that's who I was attracted to. I always connected with guys as well, but they were like my bros, and there was no sort of like attraction in that sort of aspect to it. So I never actually really felt the need to actually like come out though. So like my coming out story is a little funny. There was no MSN Messenger. It was like an old school kind of like note that the girl I was seeing at the time was kind of writing to me, and Mom read it. And she found it and she read it. And so she that's how she kind of like found out about it. And she asked me, like, what exactly does this mean? And I was like, I don't know what that means. What do you think it means? And at first, you know, like I think she was like, I mean, I'll let her talk about it, but I mean, like at first I think she was like really just worried, right? Because she's raising a woman in the society, and then she's raising an Indigenous woman. So let's add that sort of danger scale onto it. And now also part of another community that also sees and experiences a lot of violence, right? And so I think like she'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think that's where her initial kind of response to it was. But everything else though, after that, like I really only had a conversation with my mom, and then I had a conversation with my dad, and Dad was just like, well, I knew, like plaid and diapers, obviously. I mean, saw that. And really then like the rest of my siblings, it was just like they knew as well. Like everyone knew, like all the way through. And so I never felt the need to actually like sit down with every single family member and say, hey, I'm gay, here I am, sort of thing, because they've all been a part of my upbringing. They've all been had a hand in raising me and developing me into the person that I am, and it's just such an integral part of who I am that I'm just kind of like, well, you made me, and this is who I am, and so you know this, and you have loved me ever since I was born, and you still continually show me love with the person that you see, and so it's not necessarily a conversation that I felt I needed to actually like put a label on and identify, sort of thing. People ask me questions. I have no problems talking about it. I've always felt open and free to bring whoever I was in a relationship with to all family dinners. And it's just, hey, this is, this is whoever, sort of thing. And that's just it. And our family is huge and very open and loving. And to be quite honest, it's not uncommon for us to show up at Christmas dinner and there to be like random new faces at the table of just someone who mom found who decided needed to come home with us for Christmas dinner. So that's just our family.
So there's never a conversation with anybody that you can think of that you sat down or you sat them down or you called them, you didn't MSN, so no. Sent a note or whatever.
No, there was never really like an outward conversation that I needed to have, sort of thing, that I felt like I needed to have, right? So I mean, like this is my mother. This is the woman who like created this physical being, who she likes to tell me I ruined her hair thickness, and like all that sort of aspects. But I have many other mothers out there. Like I have another one sitting over there, my aunts. Yeah. All of my aunties are like other mothers to me, and they just raised me, and they helped to create this. And so, yeah.
Bonjour, I'm Mesco. I was adopted into the Sinclair family, and so a lot of what I speak about in terms of my early childhood was in a different family. And I grew up as a ward of the court and care, and a large part in my early childhood with my paternal grandparents, but afterward in rotating in different homes. So I think when we first were invited to join in this discussion and talk about our experience coming out, as a child from a family of color, a poor family in a rural community, sexual orientation wasn't a luxury that we had to think about. I mean, you worried about, did you have clothes? Did you have food? Could you get school lunch? Or if you had to bring your lunch, how embarrassed were you that you were bringing government commodity food for lunch? And I think that in addition to that, there were generational abuse and trauma that took place in the homes. So there were those things that you worried about at a daily basis, I think. I didn't even begin thinking about my sexual orientation or who I might want to be with, because it sounds dramatic, but I was like, I don't even know if I'll live to adulthood, so I'm not thinking about what my orientation is. So I think it's a little bit, for students of families of color, particularly those who are struggling in a socioeconomic way as well, I do think it's a luxury to be able to think about sexual orientation, and it's a luxury I hope our son and all the children in our families now get to have, because it is important. For me, I identify as a bisexual woman, but getting into semantics, my sexual orientation tends to be more towards women. I feel safer with women. So I think on the outside, most people think I'm a lesbian, but I have equal attraction to both men and women. And when we were talking about, what it means to be two-spirit, and I think it can be a different definition for everyone, but the way that I understand what it means to be two-spirited, and it really did help guide me in my life, was that for us, our Creator has both the male and the female equally present. Our Creator is not a man, our Creator is not a woman, is the two-spirit equal being. And that to be two-spirit, it's not a sexual orientation, it's a spiritual presence and orientation. It's not how you choose who to date, but how you express yourself. And that, to me, felt very comforting at a time when I wasn't really talking about this with anyone. Coming into the Sinclair family, and I think being accepted for just who I am, regardless of who I date, the things that I do or bring to the family, like, they're just accepted, and it was a comfort that I had coming into a family, for sure. As a parent, I think about my choice and identity as a gay woman a lot more. I worry about the safety of my child. We used to live in Maryland, and we're looking to leave, and when we were thinking about places to move, we looked at whether or not it was a politically safe community. And Eric and I have been together like 15 years. We've never considered that in all the moves that we've made. We move where we want to move, where, a job is. But now that we're parents, we think about it differently. We don't want to live in a state where we feel like our parental rights could be challenged. It's really important to us that we move into a school district that is diverse, that is going to be welcoming of a same-sex family. And, our son, whether or not right now his biological identity is as a male, but if that changes, it's open to that. So it's interesting now as a parent, I think about my sexual orientation a lot more than I ever did when I was dating. And I think that just comes with parenthood. And I really hope that he will have access and acceptance in a way that I just never did. And so far that's proven to be true, and I think with the extended family that'll always be the case. If there's something that I can't provide one of his aunties or mush him or cook him, always will. I do thank you for inviting us to be here. This sort of forum is so important. I wish that all colleges and universities and high schools were having discussions like this.
So, given that it sounds like you've got a pretty supportive family and a pretty supportive extended family, is that fair to say? That's great. And now you're raising, their little ones now. And so what would you share with other families, other Two-Spirit, other Indigenous, other, queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, people of color, with family members who are queer, with young ones who are queer, who may be having challenges in their families, who don't have family members who are as supportive, or extended family members who are as supportive? What would you say have been the strengths that you would hope to share with other people?
Bonjour. Bintigekishko Kwena Dishnagas Ginko Todem. I am middle sister Danae. It's really nice to be here and share the stage with my sisters and my mother and my nephew running around, and my cousin Desiree, who's doing a great job making sure he doesn't fall off the stage. So, I think something important that has been a sort of questions that we've asked or have personally I've been wondering is, we're traditional in our ceremonial practice, as Dad alluded to in our video, and we know that even in those traditional ways, being Two-Spirit, it's not new. It's not like all of a sudden 10 years ago, like Two-Spirit people just arrived. That's not new. There was always Two-Spirit people. There was always people on that spectrum of belief and of life, and those people had a very, very important role in our communities and in our lodge and in our ceremony. And I think that's something really important, I think, for people to remember as they're trying to find their place. And I don't think we have the answers. Our lodge doesn't have all those answers yet about what was the role for Two-Spirit people. But they're there, and people are having those conversations, as we're evidenced by what's going on in this room today. But to keep asking those questions to our leadership and our knowledge keepers about what is the role of Two-Spirit people, because we know that it is very special and sacred relationship that Two-Spirit people have with creation, with the Creator, and recognizing that balance. So I think I look forward to the future where we're learning more about what those roles are and how I can support my sisters and my relatives in doing that work that we know is really important. Shivani agrees with me.
I think for myself, the thing that helped me the most, I think, growing up and knowing and realizing that it was that I was gay and that it was okay was mainly just because like my parents, from the moment I was born, always gave me a really strong sense and understanding of who I was as an Indigenous person. And so I didn't have that dual struggle of trying to understand my sexuality as well as trying to understand me. So I always had like a really healthy self-awareness, and I always had an overly healthy self-confidence. And I think just because of that allowed me to be able to look at myself and be like, this is me, and I am exactly the way that the Creator made me. That my spirit is the exact representation of what it's supposed to be. And I think the other part of that is that like our understanding of children and our understanding of babies is that those spirits that represent those babies, they choose their families. They choose their mother and father. And that's what they always said to me, you know, and they made me feel that way. So it wasn't necessarily one of those ideas or thought processes of like, well, I made you and I'll do what I want sort of thing. And it's more or less like they just celebrated me for me because I chose them, and they gave me this physical vessel, right? But my spirit chose them. And that's how they always made me feel, sort of thing. So.
And Catherine, what was your experience with all of this?
Bonjour, Nimki Queen Adishnakas, Makwadodam. I want to, before I talk about my personal family here, I spent, my sister and I were at the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's and Girls hearings that were being held in downtown Winnipeg at the Radisson. We were there for 4 days. I want to say that I have so much love and respect for the families and the survivors who have lost their loved ones. I honor them, and it just has, I mean, this has been going on. The Indigenous community has been targeted. Our women have been targeted. We know that our women continue to go and disappear. This is not something that's new. And my heart always ached when I would pick up the paper or I'd hear in the radio another woman, another child. But as a result of being there, I just have, I can't explain, I can't find the words, I just have a renewed, deeper, more passion for the survivors. And I personally am making a commitment to do more in my community, and to do more, find ways to do more to support the families who suffer and shed so many tears alone. And I want to ask each of you that is here today, find a way to show this support. Find a way to take care of someone who is crying, who's angry, who's afraid, who's lost. I met so many young Anishinaabe girls, women, that are all alone. They don't have mothers. They have no one. No one. And I sit here today and I'm so blessed. Because I have all these crazy kids. And I have this amazing grandson. And I have an amazing granddaughter sitting there. And my biggest fear, I don't care if my daughters, my grandson, I don't care what they want to be or who they are. They're human beings. They have a spirit. They have life and they bring joy to me. They've given me so much more than what I could ever say that I gave to them. Whoa, did I say that out loud? Dang. Darn. Because I'm always saying, you guys owe me. But I just, I think, I especially think about this young woman who shared her story at the end of the day yesterday, and we're going to connect, you know? We're going to connect because there's no reason in the world why she should walk alone in this world. If you can open your hearts and love somebody, do it, you know? Give that person a hug. I do funny things. They tell me all the time, you know, like, I remember when Gejik was little, you know, she was about 3, and my husband and I were talking. I think we should adopt some children. We have lots of love to give, you know, and you know, she had her brother and she had her sister. We didn't know Misko then, and so we sat her down and we said, Gejik, Daddy and I want to tell you something. We would like to adopt some children. And she looked at us, you know, like, what are you saying? And I said, what do you think of that? You know, some brothers, some sisters. And she said, no, I don't want to share you with anybody, you know? And then over the years, you know, like our home, my family grows. Like she says, she never knows who's going to be in our house, you know, who's going to be sitting at the dinner table with us, who else is going to be, you know, grow and become a part of our family. That's just the way we are. And we don't look for somebody that's gay, like, you know, we don't look for somebody with any kind of label. You know, we just look for that beautiful spirit. And that's what I see in people. I see spirit first. I see spirit. And I don't need to go any further than that, you know? You are a human being. You deserve family. If you don't have one yourself, we've got room for you. We've always got room for another daughter, another son, another grandson, another, you know?
Somebody's got to get on there.
No pressure, Danae. One of the things I'm going to be quite honest about when Gejik had that conversation with her dad and I always watched my mom. My mom was a very strong woman. She was a single parent that raised 10 of us, and we were all different. You know, we were all different. I was the angel. That one over there was, you know, the other side. She threw me under the bus the other day. Somebody asked, who is the most mischievous one? And immediately the finger went out to me. So today I got you back. And my mother was, she was very strong, she was very strict, and she was very non-judgmental. She was very kind. She was a very kind woman. And she had a very hard life. She had a very hard life. My sister and I were reflecting on our mother the other day. Our mother's been in the spirit realm for almost 20 years now. And when I think about it, she used to say, you'll know a different love when you have a grandchild. When you have a grandchild, it's different. It's not that you don't love your children. I love all you guys, but those grandchildren are who I love in a different way. And it's true. When my granddaughter arrived, she was perfect. She could do whatever she wanted. She never heard the word no, you know, like my kids heard. She had full realm, you know, full movement to do whatever it was she wanted. Same thing with my grandson, eh? And the thing that I was looking forward to was my daughter seeing a mini G. You know, seeing that, eh? I wanted to see that in my lifetime, just like I want to see a mini D, you know, Danae. And you know what Misco, the gift that Misco has brought to me is Gijit can adopt 12 children, and I'm going to love them as much as I would have if she'd given birth to them herself, because that guy over there, I see so much of me in him. It's amazing. You know, like when he does something fantastic, I say, he got that from his cookum. You know, not his mushum, his cookum. You know, it's not blood. It's not blood that makes family. You know, it's heart. And so I don't worry about that anymore. And she told me from the time she was little, like, I'm not doing that to my body, you know. And I accept that and I honor that today. You know, she doesn't have to give birth. There's other ways to have children. And that's so wonderful. That's so wonderful. And my family, my extended family, they don't question any of this. They just love. You know? They just love. And that's pretty great. I worry, I've always worried. My biggest fear and the biggest challenge of being a mother of daughters who live an alternative lifestyle is what somebody might do to them. What people out there might do to them. And I heard firsthand about what happened to some Two-Spirit people by others, how their lives were taken because they were Two-Spirit, and what atrocities were done to them. And that's my biggest fear. And I am always telling them, please, I know you're responsible women. I know you can take care of yourself, but it's those people out there that, you know, those people that have sick minds. You know, and you can turn on the news and you can hear down south one of the sickest ones. You know, and he's just a reflection of so many. And we have our own here at this side of the border, but I said I wasn't going to get political like that. You know, so it's not, you know, within our community. It's the people out there that we have to watch and be ever so careful for. And when they were moving, I said, make sure where you go, make sure that that community is open, that my grandson is going to be safe, that you are going to be safe. You know, I never thought of those things before, and that's something that I'm always thinking about now. So I'm really happy that this university, and in particular my niece over there, has, I know, fought a big battle to get things done, and I'm not sure who your co-chair is, but I want to acknowledge the work that you guys have done together. And I think these conversations need to happen all the time, everywhere, in every way. And if you can talk to somebody, that your friend, and then talk to their friend, and just keep the conversation going. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Because you are who you are. You are who you were meant to be. There is no question of that. And I'm a Bear Clan member. Like, that's my clan, my Dodam. And you don't cross Mama Bear. And people know that. You know, you do not cross. And I'll take on anybody. I don't care if they're 6'4" and 240 pounds. Never been scared. And a lot of people know me. I'll challenge anybody that questions my daughters, my family, or any family, any person. I'm a real good listener. I'm a real good listener. And if you ever want to just visit me, I live here in Winnipeg. I haven't done the silly thing of moving to Ottawa. I visit there. So come and sit and have a cup of tea with me. I would be honored. I think it's a great, I'm happy that our communities have come together, and you know, there was a question raised. Why has this happened? Why are these prejudices? Why does this happen between people who have all been, you know, hurt and have had walked a similar path, you know, because we're all recovering. We're all at different stages of recovery and reclamation. And in my community, you know, the atrocities, the genocidal practices that happened, it took them, you know, 7 generations. They tried to kill the Indian in the Indian. And we're just fighting to reclaim who we are. And it's going to take time. And when you're dealing with people that hate themselves, when you're dealing with people that can't look in the mirror and say, I love you, then they're going to reach out and they're going to project that anger as well. So hug them. Yeah. Hug them. I know sometimes it gets hard to hug, but I usually tease them into hugging me. So I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. Thank you so much.
I don't even know what the question was.
I don't know either. Yeah, it doesn't matter. That was amazing. Thank you. How are you for time? We're out of time. I just have 2 more questions. I'm just kidding. I know it's going to stress you out. Okay, so thank you so much. That was wonderful. Very, very grateful for you sharing your time with us. I'm going to give you, we'll get tea next week?
Yes.
Amazing.
I love green tea.
Wonderful, me too.
Yeah.
Okay. I will bring it. Okay. All right, so we're going to go into our breakout table sessions now.